The Velkar Empire had been conquering the galaxy for 300 years. Their ships were massive, dark, and covered in weapons that could destroy entire planets. They had defeated every species they encountered. Some fought back for a few weeks, others surrendered immediately. But in the end, everyone surrendered. That was the pattern. That was the rule. Commander Tavok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Will. He was tall, covered in gray scales, with 4 arms that moved with practiced efficiency. His eyes, black and emotionless, scanned the tactical display before him. 847 star systems, 847 victories. Not a single defeat in the entire history of the Velkar expansion. The bridge crew worked silently around him. They knew their commander did not tolerate unnecessary noise. They watched their screens and waited for orders. "Status report," Tavok said. His voice was flat, cold. "We have entered the Sol system, Commander," his second officer replied. "The target planet is designated Earth. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level is primitive. No graviton shields. No neural networks. Their fastest ships use chemical propulsion." Tavok allowed himself a small smile. Chemical propulsion. How quaint. The Velkar had abandoned such crude methods 5 centuries ago. "Their military strength?" he asked. "Minimal, Commander. They have nuclear weapons but lack the delivery systems to threaten our fleet. Their orbital defenses consist of simple satellites and space stations. We could destroy them all within an hour. And their political structure? Fragmented, Commander. They have divided themselves into nearly 200 separate governments. They call them nations. There is no unified planetary authority." Tavok's smile widened. Fragmented governments were easier to conquer. There would be no unified response, no coordinated defense. Some would surrender quickly to save themselves. Others would fight and die uselessly. Within a week, perhaps 2, Earth would belong to the Velkar Empire. "Broadcast the standard ultimatum," Tavok ordered. "All frequencies, all languages." The communications officer nodded and activated the transmission. The message was simple, translated into every human language simultaneously. It had been used on 847 worlds. It had never failed. "People of Earth, this is Commander Tavok of the Velkar Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our dominion. You have 3 days to surrender unconditionally. Transmit your acceptance on this frequency. If you surrender, your lives will be spared. Your cultures will be preserved. You will serve the Empire. And the Empire will bring order to your world. If you refuse, we will demonstrate our power. Your cities will burn. Your leaders will die. And then you will surrender anyway. Choose wisely. You have 3 days." The message ended. The bridge crew waited. They had sent this message hundreds of times before. Usually, the responses came within hours. Fear, panic, desperate pleas for mercy. Sometimes a few brave souls tried to negotiate, but negotiation was not an option. The Velkar did not negotiate. They conquered. Hours passed. The human governments scrambled to respond. Their communication networks lit up with frantic messages. Emergency meetings were called. Military forces were mobilized. Leaders argued and shouted and tried to make sense of the impossible situation facing them. In a bunker beneath what had once been the city of Seoul, a young woman named Jiwon sat at a computer terminal. She was an engineer, barely 25 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her hands moved quickly across the keyboard as she analyzed the Velkar transmission. "They think we're primitive," she said to the man sitting beside her. Daeho was older, perhaps 30, a pilot who had been grounded when the Velkar fleet appeared. His flight skills were useless against ships that could cross the solar system in hours. Now he sat in a bunker, watching the world prepare to end. "We are primitive," Daeho said quietly. "Compared to them, maybe," Jiwon replied. "But primitive doesn't mean stupid." Across the planet, similar conversations were happening. In underground command centers, in military bases, in government offices. Humans argued about what to do, Some said they should surrender immediately. Why die for nothing? The Velkar were too powerful. Resistance was impossible. Others disagreed. They said surrender was worse than death. They said humans had fought impossible odds before. They said even if they lost, they could make the Velkar pay for every meter of ground. The arguments raged for 3 days. And when the deadline came, Earth's response was transmitted on all frequencies, in all languages, unified for perhaps the first time in human history. One word: no. Tavok stared at the tactical display in disbelief. He read the message 3 times, certain there had been a translation error. But the message was clear, simple, unmistakable. No, he said aloud. They said no? His second officer checked the readings again. Yes, Commander. The transmission came from multiple locations. It appears to be their official response. Tavok felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. This was not how conquests worked. Species did not simply refuse. They might fight for a time, but they understood the futility of resistance. They understood that the Velkar always won. Perhaps they do not understand, his weapons officer suggested. Perhaps they think we are bluffing. Then we will educate them, Tavok said coldly. Target their orbital installations. All of them. Destroy their space stations. Destroy their satellites. Destroy anything in orbit around their planet. Show them we are not bluffing. The orders were given. The Velkar weapons fired. Beams of concentrated energy lanced through the void of space. Human space stations exploded in silent fury. Satellites disintegrated. Orbital platforms that had taken decades to build were reduced to debris in minutes. On Earth, people watched the destruction through telescopes and sensors. They saw their dreams of reaching the stars burn away in moments. Some wept. Some prayed. Some simply stared in numb horror. In the bunker beneath Seoul, Ji-won watched the destruction on her monitor. Her hands were shaking. Beside her, Daeho's face was pale. They're showing us what they can do, Ji-won whispered. I know, Daeho said. They'll hit the planet next. I know. We can't stop them. Daeho looked at her. His eyes were hard. No. We probably can't. Then why did we say no? Ji-won asked. Daeho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would be repeated across Earth in the days to come. Something that would define humanity's response to the Velkar threat. Because they expected us to say yes. And I'm tired of doing what's expected. Above Earth, Tavok waited for the planet's surrender. He was certain it would come now. The humans had seen what the Velkar could do. They had lost everything in orbit. Now they would understand. Now they would submit. But no surrender came. Instead, the human military forces mobilized. Ancient nuclear missiles were pulled from storage. Fighter jets scrambled. Ground forces dug in around major cities. It was futile, meaningless, a gesture of defiance that would accomplish nothing. But they did it anyway. Tavok watched the human response with growing irritation. They were preparing to fight. Actually preparing to fight. Against the Velkar Empire. Against ships that could destroy continents. Against weapons they could not even comprehend. It was absurd. It was illogical. It was unprecedented. Commander, his second officer said carefully. Perhaps we should simply proceed with the invasion. Crush their resistance. They will surrender once they see our ground forces. Tavok nodded slowly. Yes. Prepare the landing forces. We will take their capitals first. Their leaders will surrender to save their people. But even as he gave the order, Tavok felt something strange. A small flicker of doubt. The humans should have surrendered. Every species surrendered. That was how the galaxy worked, so why hadn't they? The question would haunt him in the days to come. 6 months had passed since the Velkar fleet arrived. 6 months of fighting. 6 months of dying. And still, Earth had not surrendered. Commander Tavok stood in the ruins of what had been called New York. The city was gone now. Reduced to rubble and ash. His landing forces had taken it in 3 days of brutal fighting. But taking it had cost him 200 soldiers, 200 Velkar warriors dead, for one primitive human city. It should not have been possible. The humans had no graviton shields. Their weapons were crude. Their armor was laughable. And yet they fought with a ferocity that shocked him. They fought from every building, every basement, every pile of rubble. They used explosives strapped to their own bodies. They drove vehicles loaded with bombs directly at Velkar positions. They died by the thousands, and they kept fighting. "Status report," Tavok demanded. His voice was harsh now. Strained from months of frustration, his second officer consulted his display. "We control 17 major human cities, Commander. But resistance continues in all of them. The humans refuse to acknowledge our authority. They attack our supply lines. They ambush our patrols. I know what they do," Tavok interrupted. "Tell me something useful. Tell me when they will surrender." The second officer was silent. There was no answer to that question. Deep beneath the ruins of Seoul, Jiwon worked by the light of emergency lamps. The power grid was gone, destroyed in the first week of fighting. Now they relied on generators that ran on fuel scavenged from abandoned vehicles. The air in the bunker was stale and smelled of oil and sweat. She bent over a workbench, her hands moving with practiced precision. In front of her lay pieces of a Velkar scout ship. The ship had been shot down 3 weeks ago by a lucky missile strike. The pilot had not survived, but the ship's systems had remained mostly intact. Daeho watched her work from across the small room. He had been out on the surface yesterday, flying a desperate mission to draw Velkar fire away from a refugee convoy. His hands still shook slightly from the adrenaline. "Can you make it work?" he asked. Jiwon did not look up from her work. "Maybe. Their technology is different from ours. The power couplings don't match. The interface protocols are alien. But the basic principles are the same. Energy goes in. Destruction comes out. That's a very simplified explanation." "I'm very tired," Jiwon said. "Simplified is all I have left." She connected 2 components with a makeshift adapter she had fabricated from spare parts. Sparks flew. She cursed and pulled her hands back. "Are you okay?" Daeho asked, moving toward her. "Fine. Just frustrated." She stared at the alien technology with exhausted eyes. "We're trying to fight starships with firecrackers. It's insane." "Yes," Daeho agreed. "But we're doing it anyway." Jiwon finally looked at him. "Why? Why are we doing this? We can't win. Everyone knows we can't win. So why do we keep fighting?" Daeho sat down on a crate beside her workbench. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My grandfather fought in a war, a long time ago. His country was invaded. The enemy had better weapons, better training, better everything. Everyone said his side should surrender. But they didn't. They fought for years. And eventually, the enemy gave up and left." "Did they win?" Jiwon asked. "No. They lost millions of people. Their country was destroyed. But the enemy left. And my grandfather used to say that sometimes, not losing is the same as winning." Jiwon turned back to her work. "That's a terrible philosophy." "Probably," Daeho said. "But it's the only one we have." Across the planet, humans were learning to fight in ways the Velkar had never encountered. In the mountains of what had been called the Himalayas, a resistance cell led by a man named Minho was perfecting guerrilla tactics. They struck at night, using weapons the Velkar sensors could not detect: bows and arrows, spears, blades, primitive weapons that produced no energy signature, no heat bloom, nothing for the advanced sensors to track. The Velkar died in the darkness, confused and terrified, killed by weapons their ancestors had abandoned millennia ago. In the jungles of South America, a biologist named So-Yun was weaponizing Earth's diseases. The Velkar immune systems had never encountered Earth pathogens. A simple virus, harmless to humans, could kill a Velkar soldier in days. She cultured the viruses carefully, spreading them through the water supply in Velkar-controlled zones. The invaders began to fall ill, their medical officers baffled by infections they could not identify. In the Atlantic, beneath the ocean in a hidden facility, a tactical analyst named Hyun-soo studied every engagement between human and Velkar forces. She had been a military strategist before the invasion, trained to think about warfare in abstract terms. Now her abstract theories were being tested in blood and fire. She noticed patterns. The Velkar fleet formations always prioritized their command carriers. They pulled back ships to protect their commanders. Even when it meant losing tactical advantages, they valued their leadership more than victory. It was a weakness, a tiny weakness, but a weakness nonetheless. Hyun-soo began drafting a plan. It was desperate. It was insane. It would kill everyone involved. But it might work. And that was more than most of their plans could claim. She called it Operation Desperate Hammer. The name seemed appropriate. Back in the ruins of New York, Tavok received a report that made his blood run cold. Another supply convoy had been destroyed. The third one this week. Human resistance forces had ambushed it, using explosives planted beneath a collapsed overpass. 20 Velkar soldiers dead. Supplies meant to last a month, gone. How? Tavok demanded. How do they keep finding our convoys? We change the routes. We vary the timing. We use every counter-surveillance technique we know. And still they find us. His intelligence officer shifted uncomfortably. They have people everywhere, Commander. Civilians who watch and report. Even in areas we control, they have networks. We cannot identify them. They look like any other human. Then kill them all, Tavok said coldly. Every human in the controlled zones. Remove the threat. The intelligence officer hesitated. Commander, that would be millions of deaths. The High Command has ordered us to minimize civilian casualties. The Empire wishes to incorporate these humans, not exterminate them. Tavok wanted to laugh. Incorporate them? These humans who fought with a savagery that shocked even the Velkar? These humans who would rather die than submit? What use were dead humans to the Empire? But orders were orders. The High Command still believed this conquest would end like all the others, with surrender, with submission, with order restored. They were wrong. Tavok knew they were wrong. But he was a soldier. He followed orders. Then increase patrols, he said instead. Double the guards on all supply routes. I want scouts ahead and behind every convoy. If the humans want to attack us, make them pay for it. The orders were given. The patrols increased. And the humans adapted. They always adapted. In Seoul's bunker, Jiwon finally succeeded. She connected the last wire, checked her calculations one more time, and activated the device. The Velkar power cell hummed to life, feeding energy into the modified missile guidance system. The weapon wasn't pretty. It was cobbled together from human and alien parts, held together with solder and determination. But the readings were stable. It works, she whispered. It actually works. Daeho leaned over to look at her creation. What is it? A guidance scrambler. The Velkar ships use graviton beams to redirect incoming missiles. This device should disrupt those beams. For about 5 seconds. Oh, 5 seconds? 5 seconds is enough for a missile to hit its target, Jiwon said. If we're lucky. And if we're not lucky? Jiwon smiled grimly. Then we die slightly faster than we were already going to die anyway. She sent the schematics to the resistance network. Within hours, engineers across the planet were building their own versions of her device. The materials were scarce. The construction was difficult. Many of the devices failed. But some worked, and the ones that worked changed everything. The next Velkar convoy ran into an ambush equipped with G1 scramblers. The missiles came in low and fast. The graviton beams fired, trying to redirect them, but the beams flickered, disrupted by the scrambler signals. For 5 seconds, the Velkar defenses failed. 5 seconds was enough. 3 transport ships exploded. Another 4 were damaged. The convoy scattered in confusion. Human forces melted back into the ruins before reinforcements could arrive. When Tavok received the report, he knew something fundamental had changed. The humans had adapted. Again. They were learning to fight the Velkar. Using Velkar technology against its creators, they were evolving as warriors, becoming more dangerous with each passing day. For the first time since the invasion began, Commander Tavok felt something he had never felt before in his centuries of conquest. Fear. Not fear of death. Velkar warriors did not fear death, but fear of failure. Fear that this conquest might not end the way all the others had ended. Fear that the humans might actually be what they appeared to be, unbreakable. He looked up at the sky. At the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere, where his fleet waited. 847 worlds conquered. This was supposed to be 848. But the humans refused to cooperate with history. The Velkar High Command met in a chamber carved from solid crystal, deep within their home world. 12 leaders sat in a circle, their faces illuminated by holographic displays, showing the situation on Earth. The displays did not show good news. War leader Sharnak spoke first. He was the oldest among them. His scales faded to pale gray with age. Commander Tavok requests reinforcements. This is unprecedented. No conquest has ever required reinforcements. How many dead? Another leader asked. Velkar casualties number 3,217. Sharnak replied. Human casualties are estimated at 3 billion. Silence filled the chamber. 3 billion deaths. And still, the humans fought. I do not understand, a younger leader said. They have lost. By any rational measure, they have lost. Their orbital defenses are gone. Their major cities are destroyed. Their military is shattered. Why do they continue? Sharnak touched a control, and a new figure appeared in the hologram, a Velkar male with the markings of a scholar. This is historian Krenal. I have asked him to study the humans, to find the flaw in our strategy. Krenal, present your findings. Krenal stepped forward. He looked tired, his movements uncertain. He had spent weeks reviewing human history, human culture, human behavior. What he had found disturbed him deeply. Honored leaders, he began. I have completed my analysis of human civilization. What I discovered is troubling. Speak plainly, Sharnak ordered. Krenal activated his own display. Images appeared. Ancient human battles, medieval warfare, modern conflicts. The humans have never known peace. In their recorded history alone, they have fought 3,240 documented wars. Some lasted a single day. Others consumed entire generations. They have fought over resources, territory, religion, ideology. They have fought over concepts we cannot comprehend. He showed more images. Roman legions marching. Mongol horsemen sweeping across continents. Trench warfare. Nuclear explosions. Guerrilla tactics in jungles. Every human culture celebrates warriors. They write songs about battles. Their children play war games. Their entertainment glorifies combat. They have specialists who study nothing but warfare. They have philosophers who think only about conflict. They have entire academic institutions dedicated to understanding violence. The High Command watched in growing discomfort. The Velkar had fought 89 wars in their entire history, and they considered themselves a warrior species. Most disturbing, Krenal continued, is that they frequently fight themselves. They have had wars between their own nations that killed millions. Wars between factions within the same nation. Wars between people who shared the same language, the same history, sometimes the same families. He showed images of human civil wars, brother fighting brother, families torn apart, cities destroyed by their own people. They view this as normal, expected. One of their strategic thinkers, a human named Clausewitz, wrote that war is merely politics by other means. For them, conflict is not an aberration, it is a tool, a mechanism for change, They have been refining this tool for 10,000 years. Krenel paused, letting the information settle. Then he said the words that would change everything. Honored leaders, we have made a fundamental error. We assumed the humans would behave like other species. We assumed they would calculate odds, recognize futility, and surrender to preserve their lives. But humans do not calculate this way. They have a concept they call stubbornness. They have another concept called spite. They will continue fighting not because they believe they can win, but because they refuse to lose. These are not the same thing. On Earth, Hyun-Soo stood in her command bunker, surrounded by displays showing Velkar fleet positions. She had been working on Operation Desperate Hammer for 4 months now. The plan was ready. All she needed was approval, and people willing to die. Explain it again, said the general sitting across from her. He was old, his uniform torn and stained, but his eyes were sharp. Hyun-Soo pointed at the central display. The Velkar command carrier is here, at the center of their fleet formation. It's protected by 15 warships and a graviton shield that can deflect any missile we fire at it. So we cannot hit it, the general said. Not with conventional weapons, Hyun-Soo agreed. The graviton shield redirects anything with a guidance system. But it's designed to handle unmanned weapons. Missiles. Drones. Things that follow predictable flight paths. And you propose we use something unpredictable? Yes. Hyun-Soo activated another display. It showed modified nuclear warheads, stripped of their guidance systems. We send 300 nuclear weapons at the command carrier. But we don't use computers to guide them. We use people. The general stared at her. You want to put pilots in nuclear bombs? Yes. Volunteer pilots who will manually fly the weapons into the target. The graviton shield can't predict human decision-making. Can't calculate what a person will do. The pilots will be able to adjust course at the last moment, steering around the defenses. The pilots will die. Yes, Hyun-Soo said quietly. They will all die, but they can take the command carrier with them, kill the Velkar fleet commander, disrupt their entire command structure. The general was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You will have volunteers. More than you need. He was right. When Hyun-Soo announced the mission, 2,000 pilots volunteered immediately. She needed 300. The others begged to be included. They argued. They pleaded. In the end, she had to turn people away. Daeho was one of the 300 chosen. He said goodbye to Ji-won in the bunker beneath Seoul, knowing he would not return. Your device worked, he said. The scramblers are changing the war. Not enough, Ji-won replied. Her voice was hollow. Not fast enough. Then this will help. Daeho smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. One last flight. One last chance to hurt them. Ji-won wanted to tell him not to go. Wanted to say they would find another way. But there was no other way. There never had been. So instead she said, Make it count. I will. They embraced. Then Daeho left the bunker, climbing up to the surface where his modified bomber waited. It was barely a bomber anymore. Most of the plane had been stripped away to make room for the nuclear warhead and the manual control system Ji-won had designed. It was a weapon with wings. Nothing more. 300 such weapons sat on runways across the planet, ready for launch. 300 pilots climbed into cramped cockpits. 300 sets of hands gripped control sticks. They were from different countries, different cultures, different languages, but they shared one thing. They had all chosen to die today so that others might keep fighting tomorrow. Back in the Velkar High Command chamber, Charnock dismissed historian Krenal and turned to his fellow leaders. We must make a decision, he said. Do we continue this conquest, or do we withdraw? Withdraw? Several leaders said at once. We have never withdrawn. We have never faced this situation, Charnock replied calmly. Krenel's research is clear. The humans will not surrender. They will fight until they are extinct, and our projections show that conquering Earth will require 15 more years and cost 60% of our military strength. Then we pay the cost, a leader said stubbornly. We are the Velkar Empire. We do not quit. Perhaps we should learn, Charnock said. The humans are teaching us a valuable lesson about the price of conquest. They are primitives. another leader shouted. Savages who throw their lives away for nothing. No, Sharnock said quietly. They throw their lives away for everything. For their planet. For their freedom. For the right to say no to us. That is not nothing. That is something we may have forgotten the value of. The argument continued, but it was interrupted by an urgent message from the fleet, over Earth. Commander Tavok's voice, strained and urgent. High Command, we are under attack. 300 nuclear weapons, manually piloted. They are, oh. The transmission cut off. On Earth, Deho felt his bomber shudder as it climbed toward space. The fuel would last just long enough. The life support would last just long enough. Everything had been calculated to the finest degree. Around him, 299 other bombers climbed alongside him. He could see them through his canopy, streaks of light in the darkness. 300 last flights, 300 warriors going to meet their end. The Velkar fleet came into view. The command carrier, massive and dark, sat at the center of the formation. Its graviton shield shimmered as it detected the approaching weapons. Velkar point defense systems opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space. Deho watched bombers explode to his left and right. Beautiful flowers of nuclear fire. Each explosion was a pilot dying. Each flash was someone who had volunteered for this moment. The graviton shield tried to redirect the remaining bombers. Beams of twisted gravity reached out, trying to pull the weapons off course. But the pilots compensated. Human hands moved on control sticks. Human minds calculated vectors. Human will refused to be diverted. Deho saw the command carrier filling his vision now. He was close enough to see its armored hull, its weapon batteries, its docking bays. Close enough to count the seconds until impact. He thought of Jiwon, working in her bunker, building weapons from scraps. He thought of all the people still fighting on Earth below. He thought of his grandfather, who had fought an impossible war and lived to tell about it. Deho would not live to tell about this, but others would tell it for him. Make it count, Jiwon had said. He aimed directly at the carrier's bridge and held course. The nuclear warhead detonated, and then another, and another. The Velkar shields tried to absorb the explosions, but there were too many, coming too fast, from too many angles. Nuclear fire washed over the command carrier. When the light faded, the carrier was gone. Just debris, tumbling through space. Commander Tavok was dead. And with him, every senior officer of the Third Fleet. On Earth, humans watched the explosion through telescopes and sensors. They saw the command carrier die. They saw the Velkar fleet scatter in confusion, and for the first time in 6 months, they dared to hope. In the high command chamber, the leaders of the Velkar Empire watched their fleet break apart. Sharnock spoke into the silence. We must decide now. Do we send reinforcements and continue? Or do we acknowledge what the humans have taught us? What have they taught us? A leader asked bitterly. Sharnock's answer was simple. That some species cannot be conquered, only destroyed. And destruction is not conquest. War leader Sharnock stood alone in his private chamber, watching the tactical displays. The Earth situation had become a disaster. The loss of Commander Tavok and the command carrier had been devastating, but not fatal. The Velkar Empire had reserves. They could send more ships, more soldiers, more commanders. The question was whether they should. He pulled up the projections again, forcing himself to review the numbers. To conquer Earth completely would require 15 years of continuous warfare. The humans would fight for every city, every town, every building. They would never surrender. The projections were clear on that point. The cost would be enormous. 60% of the Velkar military strength, thousands more ships, hundreds of thousands more soldiers. And at the end, what would they have? A planet of ashes and bones, a world so devastated that it would be worthless for generations. Sharnock had been a warrior for 300 years. He had personally led 27 conquests. He understood warfare. He understood victory. But he was beginning to understand something else. The difference between winning a battle and winning a war. The Velkar were winning every battle against the humans. Their technology was superior. Their ships were faster. Their weapons were more powerful. Every engagement ended with more human dead than Velkar dead. But the humans did not care. They did not calculate casualties the way other species did. They did not weigh their losses against gains. They simply fought. And kept fighting. And would never stop fighting. That was the real problem. Not human strength, human stubbornness. Sharnak made his decision. He opened a communication channel to Earth, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Humans of Earth," he said. "This is War Leader Sharnak of the Velkar High Command. I speak with the authority of the entire Empire. For 14 months, we have fought. You have lost billions of your people. We have lost thousands of ours. This conflict benefits neither of us." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. What he was about to offer was unprecedented in Velkar history. "The Velkar Empire acknowledges your strength. We acknowledge your refusal to submit. Therefore, we offer new terms. Become our allies, not our subjects. Retain your governments. Retain your autonomy. Retain your worlds. In exchange, join the Empire as equals. Together, our combined strength would be unstoppable. This offer is genuine. Respond within 3 days." The transmission ended. Sharnak sat back, wondering if he had just made the greatest strategic decision of his career or the greatest mistake. On Earth, the message caused chaos. In bunkers and command centers across the planet, human leaders argued furiously about what it meant. "It's a trap," Minho said in the Himalayan command post. "They want us to lower our guard." "Maybe," his second-in-command replied. "But they could have kept fighting. They didn't need to offer terms." In the South American Resistance Network, Soyeon analyzed the message carefully. "They're afraid," she concluded. "They've never encountered a species like us. They don't know how to handle us, so they're trying something new." In the Atlantic Command bunker, Hyun-soo studied the tactical situation. She had been preparing follow-up operations after the success of Desperate Hammer. More suicide attacks. More desperate gambles. The loss of Daeho and the other pilots still hurt, but their sacrifice had changed everything. Now this, an offer of alliance, of equality. She called a meeting of the senior resistance commanders. The meeting took place over encrypted communications, linking bunkers and bases across the planet. Faces appeared on screens, hollow-eyed and exhausted. These were the people who had kept humanity fighting for 14 months. "Opinions," Hyun-soo said simply. The arguments began immediately. Some said, accept. Some said refuse. Some said negotiate for better terms. The discussion went in circles for hours. Finally, an older commander, a woman who had lost 3 children in the war, spoke up. "I think we need to ask ourselves a question. Not whether we trust them. Not whether this is a trap. But what kind of people we want to be after this war ends." "What do you mean?" someone asked. "I mean, if we accept their offer, we become part of their empire. Junior partners, maybe. But still partners. We legitimize everything they've done. Every world they've conquered. Every species they've enslaved. We say that was acceptable. And if we refuse?" Hyun-soo asked. "Then we keep fighting. And probably die. All of us." The woman's voice was steady. "But we die on our terms. We die as free people who never bowed." The bunker was silent. Everyone understood the weight of the choice. Accept and live as allies to conquerors. Refuse and die as free humans. Hyun-soo looked at the faces on her screens. "We need to put it to a vote. Not just us. Everyone. Every surviving government. Every resistance cell. This choice belongs to all of humanity." The vote took 2 days. Billions of people, hiding in bunkers and ruins, cast their decision. Some regions voted to accept. Some voted to refuse. But when all the votes were counted, the result was clear. 68% of humanity voted to refuse the Velkar offer. Hyun-soo read the final tally and felt a strange mix of pride and grief. Humanity had chosen death over submission. Again. She drafted the response message personally, keeping it simple. War Leader Sharnock. We have considered your offer. We decline. We also decline to continue this war on your terms. Therefore, we offer our own terms. Leave our system. Do not return. This is your only warning. If you refuse, we will continue fighting until one of us is extinct. Choose wisely. You have 3 days. She sent the message and waited for the fury that would surely follow. The Velkar would be insulted, enraged. They would retaliate with everything they had. But the fury never came. In his chamber, Sharnock read the human response 3 times. Then he began to laugh. It was a harsh, bitter sound. The humans had not just refused his offer. They had turned it around. They had given him an ultimatum, as if they were the ones with the superior fleet. As if they were the ones who could dictate terms. The audacity was breathtaking. He called an emergency session of the High Command. The leaders gathered, reading the human message with expressions ranging from shock to rage. This is an insult, one leader shouted. They dare threaten us? They have been threatening us for 14 months, Sharnock replied calmly. Why does this surprise you? We should destroy them. Burn their planet to bedrock. Show the galaxy what happens to species who defy us. Sharnock nodded slowly. We could do that. It would take time. It would cost us dearly. But yes, we could destroy Earth. And then what? Then we move on to the next conquest. Will we? Sharnock activated the tactical displays, showing not just Earth but the entire Velkar Empire. Look. Really look. 37 subjugated species have rebelled since the humans refused to surrender. They have seen what we saw, that resistance is possible, that a primitive species with obsolete technology can fight the Velkar Empire to a standstill. He changed the display to show military deployments. We have fleet elements tied down on 16 worlds, fighting rebellions. Our forces are stretched thin, our resources are depleting. The humans did this, not by defeating us, but by refusing to lose. So we let them dictate terms? A leader asked incredulously. We withdraw because they tell us to? No, Sharnock said. We withdraw because it is the strategically sound decision. We withdraw because continuing this war will destroy us as surely as it will destroy them. We withdraw because the age of easy conquest is over. The humans have taught the galaxy a new lesson. The debate raged for hours. Some leaders demanded continued war. Others saw Sharnock's logic. In the end, the vote was close. But Sharnock's position won. The Velkar Empire would withdraw from Earth. The fleet began its departure 3 days later. Ships lifted from Earth's surface, abandoning bases and positions they had held for over a year. The human defenders watched in disbelief as their enemies simply left. In Sol's bunker, Jiwan watched the Velkar ships vanish into the sky. She felt numb. They were leaving, actually leaving, after 14 months of fighting, after billions of deaths, after the loss of Deho, and so many others. The Velkar were simply going away. Is it over? Someone asked. I don't know, Jiwan replied honestly. Maybe, for now. She thought about Deho, about his last flight, about his sacrifice. He had died to kill a Velkar commander, to disrupt their fleet, to buy humanity more time, and somehow, impossibly, it had been enough. In the Himalayan base, Minho watched the last Velkar transport disappear over the horizon. His guerrilla forces had been preparing for a major assault. Now they stood down, uncertain what to do with peace. We won? One of his fighters asked. No, Minho said. We didn't lose. That's different. In the Atlantic bunker, Hyunsu received confirmation that the Velkar fleet had left Earth's orbit entirely. They were heading out of the solar system, back to wherever they had come from. She sat down heavily in her chair. Her hands were shaking. For 14 months, she had been planning operations, calculating odds, sending people to their deaths, and now it was over. Not because they had won, but because the Velkar had chosen to leave. She thought about the 2,000 pilots who had volunteered for Desperate Hammer. The 300 who had flown. The 300 who had died. They had expected to die. They had died willingly. And their sacrifice had worked, not because it destroyed the Velkar fleet. It hadn't. The Velkar could have recovered from that loss, but it had shown the Velkar something they had never seen before. A species that would pay any price, accept any loss, die by the billions, rather than surrender. That was what had truly won the war. Not superior technology, not better tactics, just the absolute refusal to quit. Hyunsu began writing her final report. It would become one of the most important documents in human history. She titled it simply, How We Survived. The first line read, "We did not win because we were stronger. We won because surrender is a choice. And we chose not to surrender." 20 years had passed since the Velkar fleet left Earth. 20 years of rebuilding. 20 years of change. The planet still bore the scars of the war. Cities remained in ruins. The population had fallen from 8 billion to 5 billion. An entire generation had grown up knowing only conflict and loss. But humanity had survived. More than survived. They had learned. Ji-won stood on the observation deck of the defense station orbiting Earth. She was 45 now, her hair touched with gray, her hands marked with scars from decades of engineering work. She watched the patrol ships moving through their formations, human-designed vessels incorporating technology they had learned from captured Velkar equipment. The ships were not elegant. Human engineering favored function over beauty. But they worked. And they were crewed by people who knew how to fight. "Director Ji-won," a young officer said, approaching her. "The latest patrol reports are ready for your review." "Any contacts?" Ji-won asked. 3 merchant vessels from the Althiri Collective. They were cleared through customs without incident. No Velkar signatures detected. Good. Ji-won took the report and scanned it quickly. The border patrols had become routine over the years. After the Velkar left, other species had begun approaching Earth cautiously. Some came to trade, some came to study the species that had defeated the Empire. Some came simply to see if the stories were true. The stories were always true. Humans did not exaggerate their defiance. If anything, they understated it. Ji-won returned to her office and continued working on her current project, a new graviton shield system that could protect an entire city. The math was complex, the engineering challenging, but she had built weapons from scraps in a bunker beneath a burning city. This was easy by comparison. Across the solar system, on Mars, Hyunsu taught a class at the new Resistance Academy. The academy had been built in the tunnels beneath the Martian surface, a monument to human stubbornness. If Earth fell, Mars would fight. If Mars fell, the asteroid colonies would fight. Humans had learned the value of backup plans. Her students today were young, born after the war ended. They had not lived through the invasion, but they studied it religiously, learning every battle, every tactic, every sacrifice. "The Velkar made a fundamental error," Hyunsu said, standing before the holographic display showing the invasion timeline. "They assumed we would calculate odds like they did. They thought we would see their superior technology and surrender logically. What was their mistake?" A young woman named Unji raised her hand. "They did not understand that humans do not surrender based on logic, teacher. We surrender based on will. And our will is stronger than their technology." "Correct," Hyunsu said. She changed the display to show the final battle. The 300 suicide bombers striking the command carrier. This operation was not logical. The pilots knew they would die. The tactical gain was minimal. We destroyed one carrier, but the Velkar had dozens more. "So why did it work?" A young man named Taeyang answered. "Because it showed the Velkar that we would never stop, that every victory they won would cost them more than they could afford. That conquering us was impossible, because we would fight until extinction." "Exactly," Hyunsu said. She felt a familiar ache in her chest, remembering Daeho and the others who had flown that day. 20 years had not dulled the loss. Remember this lesson. Strength is not about having better weapons. Strength is about refusing to quit. Every war we study, every human conflict throughout history, teaches this. We have never been the strongest, but we have always been the most stubborn. The class continued. When it ended, Eunji and Taeyang approached Hyunsu's desk. "Teacher," Eunji said hesitantly, "is it true that you wrote the battle plan for Operation Desperate Hammer?" Hyunsu nodded. "Yes. I wrote the plan. Others executed it." "What was it like?" Taeyang asked. "Knowing you were sending people to die?" Hyunsu was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It was the worst decision I ever made. And I would make it again without hesitation. That is what war means. Terrible choices. Necessary sacrifices. You study tactics and strategy because you hope you will never need them. But if you do need them, you must be ready to make those choices." The students left, and Hyunsu sat alone in the empty classroom. She thought about the war often, the choices she had made, the people who had died following her orders. She had never forgiven herself for those deaths. She hoped she never would. Forgiveness would mean forgetting. And the dead deserved to be remembered. On Earth, in the rebuilt city of Seoul, Minho ran a training facility for resistance fighters. Not all resistance was military. The Velkar were gone. But the galaxy was dangerous. New threats would emerge. Humanity needed to stay ready. Today he was teaching urban combat to a group of civilian volunteers. They were not soldiers. They were engineers, teachers, doctors. But they trained twice a week, learning to fight in the ruins and tunnels that still scarred their city, just in case. The Velkar had better weapons, Minho said, demonstrating a defensive position. Better armor. Better everything. So we did not fight their way. We fought our way. In tunnels, they could not fit through. With weapons their sensors could not detect. We made their advantages irrelevant. He showed them how to move silently, how to use terrain, how to strike and vanish. Ancient techniques, perfected over thousands of years of human warfare, still effective against advanced technology. One of the volunteers asked, "Do you think they will come back?" Minho considered the question. Maybe. Probably. The Velkar Empire is still out there. Larger than us. More powerful than us. But they know what it costs to fight us now. They know we will not surrender. That knowledge protects us better than any weapon. In orbit around Earth, a new ship arrived. Not human. Not Velkar. It was an Althiri vessel. Crystalline and beautiful. Carrying an ambassador who wished to speak with humanity's leaders. Jiwon met the ambassador in the station's diplomatic suite. The Althiri was tall and translucent, its body refracting light in strange patterns. It spoke through a translation device. "Director Jiwon, thank you for receiving me. My people wish to establish formal relations with humanity. We are open to trade and cultural exchange," Jiwon replied carefully. "We seek more than that," the ambassador said. "We seek to learn from you." The Althiri surrendered to the Velkar after a single battle. "We calculated that resistance was futile. But you proved calculation is not everything. You proved will matters more than weapons. We wish to learn this from you." Jiwon studied the crystalline being. The Althiri had been conquered 30 years ago. They had served the Velkar Empire obediently. But after Earth's defiance, rebellions had spread. The Althiri had been among the first to rebel successfully. "What do you wish to learn?" Jiwon asked. "How to fight when logic says you cannot win. How to resist when resistance seems impossible. How to choose freedom, even when freedom costs everything." Jiwon smiled sadly. "Those are hard lessons. They cost us 3 billion lives to learn. We know. That is why we respect them. That is why we wish to learn them." The ambassador's form shifted, colors flowing. "The galaxy is changing. Director Jiwon, the Velkar Empire is fracturing. Subjugated species are remembering their freedom. And they all looked to humanity as the example. The species that said no. The species that refused to kneel. "We are not teachers," Jiwan said. "We barely survived. Survival is the lesson. You faced extinction and chose to fight anyway. That choice changed everything. Not just for you, but for all of us." After the ambassador left, Jiwan stood at the observation window again, looking down at Earth. The planet was scarred but healing. Forests were regrowing in irradiated zones. Cities were being rebuilt. Life continued. She thought about Daeho. About his last words to her. "Make it count," he had said. And she had. They all had. Every person who died in the war had made it count. Their sacrifice had not just saved Earth, it had inspired a galaxy. That evening, Jiwan received a message from Hyun-Soo on Mars. They stayed in contact, the surviving architects of humanity's defiance. The message was simple. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice? If billions died for the right reasons?" Replied in 70. "One of Rai. Rai. One of Rai." Jiwan replied. "Every day. But I look at the young people now. Free people growing up on a free world. And I think yes, we made the right choice. Not because it was easy, not because it was smart, but because the alternative was unthinkable." In the Velkar Empire, historian Krenel published the final volume of his comprehensive study of humanity. It had taken him 20 years to complete. The work was titled, "The Species That Would Not Kneel, A Complete History of Human Resistance." It became required reading at every Velkar military academy. Young Velkar officers studied human tactics, human psychology, human stubbornness. They learned the lessons their empire had paid so dearly to discover. The final chapter of Krenel's work was titled, "What We Learned." It contained a single paragraph. The Velkar Empire conquered 847 worlds before encountering humanity. We defeated species more advanced than ourselves, more numerous than ourselves, more ancient than ourselves, but we never encountered a species like humanity. A species for whom surrender is not a calculation but a choice. A species that will die rather than submit. We learned that some species cannot be conquered. They can only be destroyed. And destruction is not conquest, it is waste. This is the lesson of Earth. May we never forget it. Back on Earth, in the rebuilt city of Seoul, a monument stood in the central plaza. It was simple. A stone obelisk inscribed with names. 3 billion names. Every person who died in the war. The monument took years to build and covered several city blocks. At the base of the monument, words were carved in every human language. Here are remembered those who refused to surrender. They fought not because they could win, but because losing while fighting is better than losing without fighting. They chose defiance. They chose freedom. They chose themselves. May we honor their choice by remaining forever free. Young people visited the monument daily. They read the names. They learned the stories. They understood the cost of freedom. Yoonji and Taeyang stood before the monument one evening, looking up at the endless names carved in stone. "Do you think we could do what they did?" Yoonji asked quietly. "If the Velkar came back? If we faced extinction again?" Taeyang was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I hope we never have to find out. But if we do, yes, I think we could. Because they showed us how." Oh. How? By choosing. By refusing to accept the unacceptable. By saying no when everyone expects us to say yes. He touched the stone, feeling the carved names beneath his fingers. That is the real lesson of the war. Not tactics, not technology, just the simple word no, and the will to mean it. They stood in silence as the sun set over Seoul, casting long shadows across the monument. Above them, patrol ships moved through the sky, protecting the planet and the people who had paid such a terrible price for freedom. The Velkar had not returned. 20 years of peace. But the patrol ships still flew. The academies still taught. The volunteers still trained. Because humanity had learned another lesson during the war: peace must be defended as fiercely as it is won. And humans, who had fought an empire to a standstill, were very good at defending what was theirs. The galaxy knew this now. The word had spread, from the Altheri to the Chorus to the Preceptors and beyond. Every species that had once submitted to the Velkar now knew there was another option: resistance, defiance, freedom. The humans had shown them the way. And the galaxy would never be the same. In the darkness above Earth, the stars shone eternal and cold. And among those stars, somewhere in the depths of space, the Velkar Empire watched and remembered and stayed away. Because some species cannot be conquered, only respected or avoided, and humanity had earned both.